The goal of today is really to let you know how to participate in the 2021 Cultural Hotspot and to hear from you about the kinds of projects you envision happening in your communities or being part of. So first of all, what is the Cultural Hotspot? It was born out of a recommendation in the Creative Capital Gains report back in 2011. This report was approved by Toronto City Council, and it said the city and partners should promote a cultural hotspot to highlight a new diverse neighborhood and community outside the city's core each year. We're now in our 8th year of the hotspot, and this year we're trying out a new approach. We're committed to being outside the core in a number of neighborhoods, but this year we're actually moving to a theme-based approach. We're going to be highlighting Artworks TO, which is Toronto's Year of Public Art, with a series of public art projects. So we're excited to be animating areas across the city in Scarborough, East York, North York, York, and Etobicoke with public art projects. We recognize that this is a really challenging time to be developing new projects as we're continuing to face the realities of the pandemic and COVID-19 kind of seeing a resurgence. So we're really hoping that creating projects and celebrating our city through public art will give us an opportunity to connect more and to share untold stories and just really brighten people's day through arts and culture. So now I'm just going to go through a little bit of a PowerPoint deck and we'll take it from there. Emma, I'll wait for you to share the screen and I'll, thank you. Thanks, Emma. Okay, so I've given you the nuts and bolts of what the cultural hotspot is. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the cultural hotspot is meant to inspire new ideas about where culture thrives in Toronto. So from May through October of 2021, we'll be shining a spotlight on arts, culture, and community in areas outside Toronto's downtown. And there are 3 goals of the cultural hotspot: to celebrate, connect, and grow. So when we talk about celebrating, we do that in part through a marketing campaign that will highlight cultural hotspot projects as well as Artworks TO. And there will be different marketing campaigns happening through the year, promotion of projects through media sponsors, transit advertising, program brochures, social media, and a website. We want to connect with you through meetings like these and hopefully through follow-up conversations. We hope this online format today will end up enabling you to make connections with new potential partners. In the past, it's always been really lovely to see projects kind of form right at our connects as people meet somebody that they had never come across before. So we hope that that is able to happen today. And growth, when we talk about growing, we see that happening through a series of projects: our signature projects, which are large scale art projects, and our Spark projects, which are smaller grassroots projects. We make an investment in the neighborhoods of Scarborough, Etobicoke, East York, North York, and York. And we do that through these projects, providing funding generally for about 30 projects each year. And we've also developed a legacy project that we call the Cultural Loops Guide and Tour Program. And that's getting digitized and going online this year, but you may have seen our guides. It will, Emma. I don't even have a guide at home. I know Emma does, but we have these guides that really show you how to navigate outside the core. So that's a piece of what we want to do, continue to promote people visiting all of the neighborhoods that we're living in. And we also have a mandate to provide opportunities for youth employment and mentorship. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So this year, Toronto's Year of Public Art, now named Artworks TO, it's kind of a whole year celebrating public art, and it kicks off the city's 10-year public art strategy. The program is going to celebrate Toronto's collection of public art and the artists behind it, while creating more opportunities for the public to connect and engage with work. Artworks TO will provide new opportunities for local and international artists to play a leading role in the development of public art projects within the city. And just pausing here, it's a real opportunity, I think, for us thinking about the cultural hotspot, how we can have really interesting public art projects happening in all of these outside the core areas. We know in the city, a lot of the public art can be concentrated in the downtown core. I mean, specifically when we're talking about kind of large monumental pieces, I know that murals have really spread throughout the city, but I think there's great opportunities for very temporary projects, for projects that just, I don't know, that we didn't even think were possible until we see them happening. And some of our panelists who are going to present today are going to touch on that. So another initiative, if we can go to the next slide, Emma, that the city has recently announced is Show Love Toronto. So this is about lifting the spirits and supporting economic and cultural activity across the city by welcoming Torontonians back to the next normal with creativity and hope. So the Year of Public Art is really firmly situated under this Show Love Toronto initiative, which is why I present this today. So some pieces of Show Love TO that you've already seen are things like Drive-In TO, about having these large-scale temporary drive-in experiences, active TO with street closures and ensuring people have space to get around in while respecting physical distancing, Cafe TO, all of the different restaurants that have been able to set up patios on streets. A newer initiative is known as Stroll TO, which motivates residents to kind of be tourists in their own neighborhood and discover local, history shops and places of interest. So the cultural hotspot will, within all of these things, I situate the cultural hotspot as kind of celebrating artworks TO, being a part of celebrating Show Love TO. I think our project at its core has always been about highlighting and celebrating communities and showing those communities as vibrant, beautiful places to live. So that's something we really want to continue to do this year. Let's go to the next slide, please, Emma. So there is a great opportunity to get involved with us, I think, through our Spark partnership projects. And through that, there's an opportunity to partner with the city to carry out a public art project. Normally, Spark is kind of focused toward new emerging or local arts organizations or community organizations, and there's generally access for funding for about $5,000 for a public art project. And these projects are about celebrating and promoting and growing community arts outside of the core, through workshops, activities, events, and other initiatives that result in the creation of public art. Let's go to the next slide. So about Spark projects, they need to celebrate arts, community, and culture, to engage community, be it as participants, artists, or audience members, be based in these outside the core neighborhoods of East York, Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, or York. They need to result in the creation of public art. And when we talk about public art, we mean that very broadly. I mean, really, it's kind of art in the public realm. It can be performance-based art, we can think really broadly about what that means. It will need to happen between May 1st and October 31st, be free to people who are participating in it, be feasible and realistic, comply with Toronto public health and provincial safety guidelines, and bring some additional resources, be that in kind or in cash. So we're going to be hosting, I'll jump back to this before I get to what I was about to say. Okay, sorry, Emma, you can go forward by one. If only we were in the same room. So priority will be given to projects that support emerging local artists, engage people from equity-seeking communities, provide opportunities for local youth employment or mentorship, and support a local arts initiative that's already active in the area. We will be hosting 2 Spark info sessions a little bit later in the fall. So this meeting is really kind of the introduction to say, this is what we're up to. We really want you to get involved. This is the way to get involved. And then we'll be having some info sessions to really break down how to apply, as well as to give feedback about project ideas. we really like this process to be one that is one of dialogue, where we can provide you some feedback, hear your ideas, and help kind of workshop your project along the way. Let's go to the next slide, please. So with that proposal process, we invite you to attend a Spark Info session, to connect with a member of our team to discuss the project. We review the project application, or sorry, you'll review the project application and budget with a team member. The proposal deadline is January 15th, 2021, and then the project will go through a project assessment. We aim to let you know that your project is going to move forward by February, and then we go through a partnership agreement process. Let's go to the next slide. So deadline, January 15th. We've put in Nafal Sheikh's phone number and email. You can also email us at theculturalhotspot@toronto.ca email address, and we will get back to you about project ideas. Let's go to the next slide. So just to consider, while we do provide funding, we know $5,000, for some is a very big project grant. For others, it feels like a smaller amount. So we encourage anybody to look to Artreach, our colleagues at Street Art Toronto, the Toronto Arts Council, and the Ontario Arts Council for funding opportunities as well. We welcome kind of co-funded projects as part of this. So we'll be sharing, I think what we'll do is we'll share our deck with you after the meeting, so you've got all of this information at hand. And let's go to the next slide. Thank you. That takes me to the end of this formal part of presenting. Thank you all for being patient and listening to me talk to you. We are going to invite questions toward the end of the meeting. The format now is going to go that we've got 3 fantastic people that I'm very grateful have joined us to share to share their public art projects. I'm going to introduce them. We'll have a bit of a panel to talk about their projects, and then we're going to move into breakout groups and then kind of all come back together. So it is my pleasure to introduce some of our speakers. I'm going to introduce each of you one by one. So I'm really grateful that you're joining us today to share information about the projects that you've led. The projects that we'll be speaking about really showcase, I think, a broad range of public art projects. Some of them have been cultural hotspot projects of the past. So first up is Anthony Tony Gebrawat, who is a passionate photographer and community leader and social entrepreneur whose creative lens re-envisions photography as an ongoing dialogue of social change between subject and society. A self-taught photographer, Tony has focused on studio portraiture and has worked with some of Canada's most prolific instigators. I had the absolute pleasure of getting to meet Tony back in 2014 when he was participating in one of our cultural hotspot projects called We Are Lawrence, and it has been amazing to watch his career flourish since that time. Really, truly impressive seeing Tony be part of Nuit Blanche, seeing his work featured in photo magazines, and just all of the projects he's been engaged with. So, Tony, please share with us. Emma is going to be running your slides for you, so it'll just take her a moment to get them up.
Peace and love, everybody. Good to see your faces. Sid, I just saw you. I saw you in the convo there. Definitely going to be talking about you too. But a little bit about me. Yeah, I've been doing this photography, visual arts thing for 11 years now. And in 2014, that was like a big pivotal moment. And I'm happy to talk about this because it really did help change my life, as a photographer. It gave me the inspiration I needed to move forward. So yeah, the first signature project that I got involved with was called We Are Lawrence Avenue. And essentially it was a project that its mission was to highlight local businesses and just people that were doing great things on Lawrence Avenue. I myself live very close to Lawrence Avenue, and it was just like a full circle kind of moment for me because I'm just down the road from where we were actually meeting up and having our sessions. And I got to shout out the mentors that were selected. So it's Che Katari and Jelani Morgan. And it's funny because like prior to this program even happening, I remember looking at like Che Katari's like content online and saying, "Man, this is the life I want to live." You know, like I really very much want to be like this guy. You know, and he just so happened to end up being one of the mentors. And Jelani Morgan, someone I looked up to for a long time as well. So it was just like a perfect thing. Like it was close to me. The mentors were there. And on top of that, the participants were amazing too. So I got to shout out Sid, who's in this chat as well. Me and him actually kind of took more of a leadership role throughout that program, and it was great working with him when it came to like setting up the installations and all that kind of stuff. So definitely shout out to Sid. Um, and I ended up making like friends to this, like who I'm still connected to this day. So it was just a really, really great program, and I was just a participant in that program. And I guess if we can go to the next slide, I think I just highlighted one of the images there. So yeah, that's Jelani Morgan. He was one of the mentors. So this photo, this is another great thing that came out of the project. I took this photo of him. I chose to work with him, and that ended up being like the first publication because that made it into the Globe and Mail, which was really awesome. And I still have that newspaper to this day because it was just like, wow, like my photos in the newspaper, you know, is a really, really cool moment. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, this was one of the images that I decided to take. So back in the day, I really loved pizza. I still do low key to this day, but I would constantly go to the shop, and his name is Mehdi, and he owned that pizza shop. And like from the moment I met him, we just always had really great, genuine conversations. And he has a great story. Like he came here on his own, left his family behind to kind of start his business and create a life for his family so that they could eventually come over here to Toronto. So like he was the guy I chose to highlight. And you know, every photographer, I think there's 14 photographers in the program. Correct me if I'm wrong. They all got to choose one person to highlight on Lawrence Avenue that was doing great stuff. And then it ended up being a public art installation. So at Pharmacy in Lawrence, there was like a vacant storefront. And we revamped that and turned that into an amazing like public installation. And like I said, it was super close to me. So I would see it almost every day when I was walking by or driving by. It was cool. So next slide. And then a few years later, Andrea, remind me if it was 2017 or 2018. It's crazy. It became like like a full circle moment. I ended up becoming that mentor that ended up mentoring me with this project called From the Margins to the Center. So over the course of those few years, I was doing a lot of work in Malvern through photography, but also through creative writing, and it was Malvern just became like a second home for me. So around that time, the city of Toronto reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're doing this project. We'd love for you to be involved." And I said, "Sure, let's do it." And this was also just like an amazing project. Because we had just a great group of people. Like it was always like 15 to 20 people that came, and to me that was just like mind blowing that everyone was so dedicated. And we called it From the Margins to the Center, and it was like a 12-week mentorship program. So like we did 12 really, I think 2 to 3 hour sessions. They were pretty long. And for the first half of the session, it would be me engaging with the group, teaching them how to use the cameras, going out, taking photos, all that kind of stuff. But each week I would bring in someone else, like a peer that I respected, who was a photographer, and they would focus on a different topic in the photography industry. So we had someone that focused on studio lighting. You could see in the image there in the back, that's CJ Cromwell, an amazing photographer who has a great studio that I always use. He brought in his professional lighting equipment, and he really broke down how to use lighting equipment. And you know, I remember when I first got into studio portraiture, like I didn't have anyone show me anything other than CJ. I had to go in, you know, act like I knew what I was doing, but also embarrass myself by showing him I didn't know what I was doing. And he would kind of break everything down for me session by session each time that I came to do a shoot with someone. So the fact that they got to experience this like prior to even doing a studio shoot, I feel like is very valuable. And I kind of wish I had that when I was coming up as a photographer. So that was one thing. Someone focused on networking. We had someone focus on street photography. So every week they were being introduced to a different like component or genre of photography. And then at the end of it, at the very end of it, we did a huge installation inside of Malvern Mall, which if you don't know about Malvern, like Malvern Mall is the center, it's the focal point. So we were bringing all these marginalized voices, all these marginalized perspectives, all these marginalized stories into the center of Malvern. And I'll never forget the day itself because I didn't know who would come. I didn't know what to expect, but like the event was packed. There were so many people there. We weren't just celebrating the exhibition, we were celebrating local talent, dancers, singers, you name it. It was just like, I really got to shout out the cultural hotspot because it really was a cultural celebration, you know? And it wasn't just like, it wasn't just a particular ethnic group, or it was like everybody came together, you know? And it was just a really awesome experience. So I'm happy to be here today to like talk to you guys about this. I really feel like the cultural hotspot has meaningful impact and they move with integrity. And yeah, I'll speak on their behalf anytime, any day. So I think that's all I'm going to say for now. So thank you for your time and thanks for listening.
Thank you for saying all of that. I feel a little teary. This is in my old age. But yeah, I agree that that day at Malvern was really special, and I feel like, you know, for any person growing up in the suburbs, like the mall is such a focal point of your community, and being able to celebrate at Malvern in the mall there was, I think, really lovely. And I will never forget the day of being on Lawrence and trying to put those vinyl transfers on windows with so that was a wonderful project, and it's great to have you here. Thank you, Tony, for sharing. And just to note, everybody, after our presenters speak, there will be an opportunity to ask them some questions about their projects, and you'll see we really invited them because, like I say, it's just such a nice variety of projects. So next up is Beth Helmers, and Beth is the artistic director of the Community Arts Guild, which is an organization based in East Scarborough that makes art of all sorts with diverse artists and residents in the community, connecting those separated from each other because of distance, language, income, age, culture, or ability, and inviting everyone to discover and celebrate the traditions that we all bring along, building inclusive community through art making. I think the project that Beth is going to present, it was a really beautiful project that happened in 2018. So I turn it over to you, Beth.
Thanks so much, Andrea. I'm really delighted and honored to be here. It was a privilege to be part of the hotspot, and it's a privilege to talk to everybody today. So I think Emma's going to share something. Oh, thank you. You're awesome. Yay. So this project was a mobile art installation, and it was a 10-foot by 5-foot loom, which we brought to different sites in North Scarborough. And Emma, so it's called interlacing. If you go to the next slide, you can see a picture. So what it was, you can see the loom there. That is at the aforementioned Malvern Town Centre, which again is an amazing community space. So you can see the loom is there, and it broke into pieces, and so we could carry it around and set it up. We had a really serious crew of people who we all got really fast at doing it. And we had these questions or prompts that invited people to write a story and then weave it into the loom. And it was a sort of a tool for arts-based research about history and stories of the neighborhood. So you can see one end of it was the past and one end of it was the future. So it went chronologically, and you could choose to put whatever story you wanted to write with the year and then weave it into the loom. And you can see some of we had 6 questions, which were color-coded. So some of them were a story of arrival, a story of departure, a story of the future of this place, a story that happened before you were born. So we really wanted to make an invitation to people to I guess, engage deeply, but in a really nice container that made it sort of inviting and allowed people to express themselves, but then combined it together. So maybe I'll get you to go to, I love that, I'll just go back to that picture for 1 minute. It was 2 dads and daughters weaving together, which made me feel really happy I just discovered that picture. I remember meeting them and how beautiful it was to see them doing that together. So yeah, we can go to the next one. We went to 7 different sites with this piece. So You can see on the left there, we were part of Nuit Blanche Scarborough, which again was such an honor and delight. And it was the first time Nuit Blanche was in Scarborough. And I can't, like, that was a life event, like being part of that moment. People were so excited. There was so much pride. And to ask that question about, okay, histories and stories of this place, people shared such incredible things. So that was really special. We mentioned Malvern Town Center, and yeah, when you're talking about businesses and VIAs supporting, like, they were just amazing. They were so helpful. They let us leave all our stuff there. They gave us an empty storefront. They helped us set things up. And there's so many people, especially elders, who kind of just hang out in that space. So it felt like we were really part of the day-to-day rhythm of life, and people were surprised to find art. So again, the cultural hotspot. I really like to do art in places where people are not going to expect it. So the invitation, people were doing back to school shopping and stuff, and they were like, what's happening here? So that was really great. So you can see a couple of shots from that. And then we were also we were outdoors at Rouge Urban National Park. We partnered with Native Child and Family Services. They run a summer camp there. So we did 3 sessions for their camp. A lot of community barbecues. Caprit and the East Scarborough storefront have a big barbecue every summer, so we went to that. And we also did a ton of outreach at community barbecues, which I would totally recommend. It's like the best place to go hang out and talk to people. We made like a little version, little mini looms that we took with us, so we could and we had our postcards, so we could tell people when it was going to happen. So yeah, Malvern Library. And we were also part of Art Side Out at U of T Scarborough. So we kind of really took advantage of this to connect with a lot of new partners, try and be in spaces that people were, was part of their everyday lives, to make the art really accessible. And trying to think of what else. Yeah, so that was really exciting. So maybe we could go to the next slide, Emma. Trying to remember what I put here. Oh yeah, so we had done this piece, we had done like a mini version of it before, so we really devoted a lot of time and energy, and this is something that I would say is useful, to thinking about the whole space and how people move through it, and making every part of it part of the art in some way. So thinking about things like signage. We had this big, you can see that sort of pocket curtain there with the different colors of materials in them. We were kind of thinking about, like, what are fun ways that we could present the materials that would be part of the art. And we had a lot of people, because it was really visual, posting pictures of themselves doing it on Instagram or different things in social media. So that was like a really fun digital life of it that we didn't anticipate, but people were kind of treating it like a photo background in a really fun way. And okay, maybe, so you can see there's a lot of stories that were gathered through this. And I did say it was arts-based research. So we're making an outdoor theater production about histories and stories of the area. And so we used the materials that people were contributing. We let them know that's what it was for. So we used some of the text and words for the performance. And people just left a really amazing variety of stories, both difficult stories, really inspirational stories, funny stories, just all kinds of things that I don't think we even really expected the depth of. And the nice thing was that when people were weaving together, I don't know, just having a shared task where you're side by side doing something allows you to talk and open up to people in a way that you maybe wouldn't have before. So that was a success or a highlight of this project, I would say, is that people really chatted with neighbors that they didn't know before and shared these personal stories. And then to see people finish the weaving and then walk away and leave their story, they felt like a great sense of accomplishment, which was a really amazing part of the piece. So if you could go to the next picture. Thank you. Yeah, okay. So this is it in the show. So at the end, we had gathered however many meters of weaving. There's actually another piece that's not in here, but it was elsewhere on the site. So the end of the show, purple, was stories of the future of this place. We invited people to add in their own stories. So we tried to create a legacy. The question people asked us most often when they were doing it is, where is this going to end up? So we still have them and probably would like to keep displaying them in the future. But this was, we really honored them as the finale of the show. And I'm trying to think of what else you wanted us to talk about, Andrea. I think for me, like the opportunity to go to all these places in Scarborough where we've not deeply connected before was really exciting. It was something that happened through the hotspot. The hotspot funding allowed us to leverage other funding, like the Artisan Libraries program through the TAC and things like that. I guess an offer I want to make is if anybody is thinking about their project and they want someone to talk it over with, I would be really happy to do that as well. And also proposal writing or advice about that. I saw some comments in the chat about how it can feel really inaccessible sometimes, those arts councils. So I will just share my contact info with Andrea as well if anybody wants some help with that, because I do think it takes a lot of resources and time. So yeah, it's good to try and combo up those supports if you can. Is there anything else I should talk about, Andrea?
I think this is great. I feel like you've covered it. And I think this last image, which I had never seen before, is just stunning. So
I thought you would enjoy kind of seeing the outcome of that. And the last thing I want to say is just express gratitude to all the people who participated in this and shared their stories. Like it was a really emotional experience and really so delightful to have the opportunity to do this with people. So thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Beth. I love seeing that project, and I can see in the chat that there's quite a few comments about how beautiful that project is. So I'm glad that it's kind of having life right now for anybody who missed it at the time. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Shayna Hillman, who is the Executive Director of East End Arts, which is a nonprofit community arts organization that serves the East End of Toronto. They provide inclusive arts programming and events to local communities, including youth, newcomers, and seniors. They also provide professional development opportunities to emerging and established artists and art organizations. It is lovely to have Shayna speaking. Shayna and I didn't get to connect in the initial hotspot time because I was busy having a baby when she came on board to East End Arts. At that time, East End Arts was doing a hotspot project called Main Squared, but Shayna today is going to be talking about a different project that East End Arts has been spearheading, which I think has had really lovely impact on the community and on the participants. So I turn it over to you, Shayna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah, we're so excited to talk about this project. It's called East End Love, which started as a hashtag. Is there a presentation? There it is. So we can skip past the first slide, just to the first image. Mostly these are just going to be photos, and I'm going to talk through them about the project. So it kind of came about because we were noticing as a service organization a lot of racism happening in our area. Our area is home to the infamous Your Ward News from James Sears, which has been in the news a lot. There'd been some tagging of our murals with alt-right hate groups URLs, and then the Ludi Lifehouse station down on the beach was tagged with swastikas, and then there was some Islamophobic postering after the Danforth shooting, and then an artist that we work with who's LGBTQ was harassed and had her van, which was all painted up as she is a muralist, with the slogan "Choose Kindness" across the back. She was harassed, managed to get to safety, but then her van was trashed and smashed up because she didn't present as these men thought that a woman should look. So our former program coordinator, Adom Achiampong, who is now at NIA Center for the Arts, and we miss her dearly, but she's gone on to do amazing things. She came to me and she asked, shouldn't we as the arts service organization do some sort of artistic response? And we knew that East End Arts isn't going to solve racism overnight, and we knew that we couldn't do that, but we also knew that art is a way to have difficult conversations. And the idea that when people come together and make things, we call it a theory of busy hands, that when our hands are busy doing things like the weaving that Beth's talking about, that our stories come out, and it allows people to realize the person they're sitting next to at the loom or whatever the activity is not so different than them, even if they might look different on the outside. So we wanted to find a way to spread messages of hope and love and kindness in the community, and to have an ability for community members to post them and put them up around the community. So we had met with an artist called Laura Lucretia. She's a local artist. She has used a collaborative stencil making workshop curriculum in the past with all sorts of groups. She's worked with environmental groups and young offenders. She's worked in the prison system. And her community engaged art practice involves using stencil screen printing, collaborative art workshops, and public art to spread messages of acceptance and anti-discrimination, anti-racism, and love. So we got together with her, and then we brought in as kind of subject matter experts, a local group called EastEnders Against Racism. And two of the founders of that organization, Rabia Martin and Saba Khan, helped lead the curriculum of the anti-oppression work that would start at the beginning of the workshops. And so we brought people together to make work. And the workshops all started by asking community members to imagine the communities they wanted to live in and how to collaboratively translate those desires into visual artwork. So they started talking about their lived experiences. They did this activity, which you see on the screen, mind mapping, talking about their own experiences in the community. And we can go to the next slide. And so here's a group working together. So then after they would do that kind of mind mapping, then they would start to collaboratively, in small groups of 3 to 4, make an image together and then cut that stencil and then eventually move towards pulling a print. So the idea is that by putting people into small groups, it like forces them into working collaboratively, but it also allowed everybody to have a different role. So even if I'm not a confident person, confident drawing, I might be really great at, moderating conversation and helping note down things on our mind map and that type of thing, so that everyone got a chance to try the different roles and take them on. And of course, we had all kinds of icebreakers and, like all great workshops, food. So if we move to the next slide. So here's like this group was really looking at the idea of like hate and it being in flames, and then the idea of the hate and let's burn it down. So that was the image they were working on. They did it collaboratively, and then they moved to cutting and making a stencil. So we can move to the next slide. And then everyone got a chance to pull a print and learn about doing that, mixing inks, all of that. And we go to the next slide. And then they were, so they would pull these beautiful prints. We worked with a ton of different partner organizations in the East End, other than EastEnders Against Racism. We also did public workshops at Access Point on Danforth and the Crescent Town Club, which is in the neighborhood improvement area of Taylor Massey. We worked with the Triangle program, which is Toronto, I think Canada's first LGBTQ alternative school. The Your Identity is Valid print is from there, and it's so stunning. We worked with Creative Works Studio, which is an offshoot of St. Mike's, Muslim Girls Taking Initiative, Hijabi Ballers, and the Toronto Indigenous Business Association. You can move to the next slide. And then the idea is that these beautiful big prints then go out into the community and can be wheat pasted around the community. So we would put them in places where there had been, racist tagging before, where there had been vandalism. So instead it's like coming back to the community with these positive messages. And you can go to the next slide. And then we also did them on telephone poles, which, fun fact for wheat pasting, are you're fine to wheat paste on them. They are Okay, and then the next slide. And then we had an exhibition. So we invited the whole community to come and view all of the collaborative art pieces that were created, and really elevate these kind of guerrilla style prints and put them in a gallery setting. And we worked with the Riverdale Hub. The exhibition ran for a full month last November. We had extended evening hours, and there was a really wonderful reception and community celebration. We also always want our events to be interactive, so we made sure that there were extra prints that people could take home, along with a little recipe to make your own wheat paste. And some pro tips for wheat pasting. And then we also had girls from the Muslim Girls Taking Initiative group who were there to help people learn how to pull their own prints from some of the existing stencils. So we have this amazing little video. It's a minute long, and we'll see if it's going to work.
There's about 21 screen prints that are here that were all made within a series of workshops around the East End, and we're partly trying to respond to incidents of racism and racist violence, which unfortunately keep increasing in Toronto. The workshops all involve a conversation, a lot of writing and thinking, and this exercise called mind mapping, and then ultimately collaborative design and cutting out a stencil and using a silkscreen to make a whole bunch of posters. And then we're also having a bigger group conversation around racism as a system and a much bigger structure, and trying to kind of unpack and dissect how we're part of that.
I hope people come in here with like an open mind, so that once they look at the artwork, hopefully maybe even ask questions about it, then they can kind of leave here with like a little bit more information about something that they may not have known.
Yay, it's so wonderful when things work. I wasn't sure, and thank you to Andrea and Lori for making sure that that worked. I know I threw a bit of a curveball at you yesterday. So what has happened, so what also happened after that is we did a lot of wheat pasting in the community. We have a group of volunteers that we called the Love Squad who took to the streets, kind of taking those posters out, hanging them up. We did that wall that you saw in the back of Marvel Coffee, which is just outside of Donlan Station. There are still posters up around the East End. We've had shuttered storefronts put them in their windows. The Danforth Mosaic BIA did a display in their window of their office. So if you see them, be sure to share them on social media, use the hashtag EastEndLove. Some program learnings and pivots that we had along the way. This was about a year-long process. We received a pilot grant for $10,000 from the Ontario Arts Council to kind of test it, figure it out, develop the workshops and the curriculum. And then we received more funding from the Department of Canadian Heritage to carry it out for the rest of the year. We found that the workshops were long. They were designed to be about 4 hours or a full day as a school trip for high schools. So, 10 to 3, assuming they're taking TCC there and having a lunch hour. And that's a really big time commitment for the public. The ideation process at the beginning, you're asking people to have these really difficult conversations about things with strangers. And we found that it was hard to draw people out of their shells. So then we pivoted to working mostly with groups who already knew each other. And then when we did that, there was a real shorthand, and we were able to produce more work and really get to the difficult parts of the conversation faster. And that's when we started working with Muslim Girls Taking Initiative, Hijabi Ballers, Kennedy House, and the Creative Works Studio. We also found there were some issues with safety when the Love Squad was out wheat pasting. And we realized when volunteers were out that it opened them up to comments from the community. And I think that just really plays into the fact that there are still issues in the community. A dome from our staff was out with a group, and there were some, microaggressions and some downright aggression, that if someone feels really challenged by seeing a poster that says acknowledge your privilege, and feels that they can be rude to, someone on the street who's just hanging up a poster, that clearly that poster meant something. So we just had to make sure that when they were in groups, we had to go through kind of a safety protocol with people, just so that they were equipped. And then also just being there to hold space for them when they came back and were relaying these stories to us, and being able to hold them and make sure that, they were okay. So kind of things that have happened next. The Creative Works participants, they ended up contributing to our Nuit Blanche storefront gallery program last year. We had noticed when we were in the studio working with their group that they were also doing a shadow puppet project, and we would have never seen it had we not went there to do a workshop with them. And we invited them to bring it to Nuit Blanche. It was a huge hit. They felt really special. Their exhibit was in the window of a hair salon on the Danforth, and the salon owner was so excited that she held a reception for them at the beginning of the night of Nuit at 7 p.m. And they just felt like professional artists. They felt like amazing. So we actually had invited them back to do multiple windows and a larger exhibit for 2020, but then of course COVID has happened. So we've actually, it's been deferred now to 2021. And I think the most exciting thing that's happened with this, and I think there's the next slide. Oh, another slide. Is that as part of Destination Danforth. So in response to COVID-19, the City of Toronto has fast-tracked 40 kilometers of cycling infrastructure across Toronto, including the Danforth. It's from Broadview to Dawes. And it really aims, as Andrea was talking about with the Show Love TO, to help local businesses recover from the pandemic, give people safe alternatives to the TTC, but also get people out on the street and visiting those businesses. The local businesses have been really hit hard. And the idea of bringing people back to main streets like the Danforth is critical. So it's about making Danforth a destination. And so it's seen a big investment this summer to enhance the public realm and add to the infrastructure so that people can walk, ride, and roll down the Danforth safely. And I think it's an important defining moment in human history right now. So we've been asked, all of us, to make really large sacrifices for the public good, keep ourselves apart. So there's the realization that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And I think that was really clear yesterday with some of the announcements. So we also felt that it's important to remind each other that we care for each other, that, as we're going down the street worriedly to do our socially distanced grocery shopping, that we deserve a reminder that we're not able to gather in large groups, but we're surrounded by beauty, and there's beauty in our community. So we've been managing a public art project for Destination Danforth, 5 new big murals along the Danforth. There's also 12 traffic signal boxes going in, beautiful, creative, like curb extensions and things like that. And we were asked to come up with 2 guiding themes that would guide the murals. And the first one was easy. It was gratitude, resilience, and hope. I think we all need that. And the second one, I think we all know the pandemic has really highlighted systemic issues that were there all along. And we wanted to build off the East End Love project. After that project came to its funding end, we've seen neighborhoods and communities that are still having increases in instances of anti-Black racism. There's been some attacks on local residents. There was an incident at Michael Garron Hospital, and there's been some activity in Dentonia Park. So clearly that work's not done. And so we invited people to use the theme East End Love to invite submissions in support of Black Lives Matter. And we ask that the murals speak to past and current injustice and the importance, benefits, and opportunities to build a better future through inclusion. And I'm happy to say that the mural, one of the murals that was selected, actually, Laura Lucretia was part of that, and she is one of the 3 artists on this project. This is the beautiful mural. It will be installed this fall, or depending what the weather is going to be like, perhaps in the spring. We're just confirming a wall location for it now. And it's just amazing that they were selected as one of the finalists, and we can't wait. It's just so timely right now that these images be in the community. And you can see in the corner, they've included images from the posters. So it also, the budget allowed that we could give funds back as artist royalty payments to the groups who created those images. So it's a really nice kind of full circle for the project. So I guess that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Shayna, for sharing that project. It's I love seeing the Destination Danforth piece and where it's gone to, but I really, I think the East End Love Project is so impactful. And I think that's one of the exciting things about having a year of public art ahead of us, is that we have these opportunities, to use paper and paint, to weave stories, to use photography. Like, there's so many different mediums that we can express ourselves through and really engage a lot of people, I think, meaningfully. So thank you so much for sharing that. So next up on our agenda is we have some time for questions for any of the 3 panelists. We may shorten the discussion time just a little bit because we want to respect your time today. And I know it's a long meeting, being in here for 2 hours. After we ask our panelists some questions, then we'll have a short break, and then we'll move into breakout groups for a little bit more discussion. So with that said, I open up the floor, I open up the chat. There is a way, I think, next to your name to raise your hand, but you can also just unmute yourself and ask a question. If you would like to get any of the panelists to speak a little bit more about their project, any challenges they faced, any joys that they had.
I had a question about community outreach.
Thanks, Tracy. Go ahead. Nice to see you, by the way.
You too, Andrea. Hi. Oh, I'm almost gonna cry. I wanted to, when you talking about the project in Malvern, for instance, I live in Malvern, and I've done like community outreach before, but when you're doing a project or you have a project plan, and let's say you're not a resident of that community, what steps do you take to like facilitate or do outreach to make sure that it's like not a you project, but a we project? So it's not like you're just going into a community doing something for doing something, but how do you make sure there's an actual impact? And that's my question.
Thanks, Tracy. Was there one of the folks who you wanted to
Anthony.
Okay,
Anthony.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it's twofold, right? So like on one level, as I mentioned, I was already doing a lot of work in Malvern. So I was kind of already connected to certain, people, places, and things that assisted me with the outreach, with, just getting connected to people. So like, rest in peace to Michelle. She was an amazing youth worker that worked at the City of Toronto. And any program that I did in Malvern, she would literally like bring youth to the program, like she would literally pull them, even if they weren't interested in going. She was cool enough for them to trust her to be like, okay, I'll come check out this program, So I was connected to youth workers, also just like people at the library, at the spot. So there was like, there's like landmarks in Malvern that have people that can connect you to youth. And then on another level, Cultural Hotspot, made the great decision of partnering with Taibu, which is like another local landmark in Malvern, and that was so key because that really made everything smooth and easy for me in terms of getting participants, because they had youth workers there as well, and they would bring in people, and I met new people there through that. But also like just the overall flow of the program, they just assisted with storing the cameras, providing food. Like they just did everything because it was literally me running the program, like
Yeah.
for the most part. So yeah, Taibu was really clutch, and I think that idea of getting the cultural hotspot to partner with them is like that's really important. And not only that, like once the program's over, I'm still connected to them and I still work with them. So like before COVID hit, I was doing a workshop series at the Malvern Public Library. And because we had such a good relationship, they allowed us, like we don't the city of Toronto donated those cameras as an in-kind donation to be like, thanks for letting us do these sessions in your space and collaborating with us. And they still let me use the cameras for my sessions that I was doing at the Malvern Public Library. So it's like really about relationship building at the end of the day, but doing it like in a genuine way,
Great, thank you. And I think I would have the same question for Beth as well.
Yeah, I would sort of echo what Anthony was saying about partnerships. I think that was really key. We've been in East Scarborough. I've been doing projects in East Scarborough for about 10 years, but mostly in Kingston, Galloway, Orton Park. So when we went to places that were outside of the neighborhood where we usually work, it was really about meeting with different organizations, residents groups, like the Art Side Out, the students at U of T Scarborough, to sort of tell them this is what the project is. Would you be interested in hosting it? Is this exciting to you? And get their buy-in, because they're the people who are they have the trust of everyone who's there, and they're the people who are gonna promote the project and kind of support it and give it the love that it needs to go. But I think something that was different about ours too is because it was kind of like a big visual piece that was there. It was an invitation, and people could choose to walk up to it or choose not to. And I think your question's a good one. Like, did people enjoy it? Absolutely. We got lots of great feedback that people did. Do we know if people didn't like it? I suppose that's a question that could be asked for sure. And for people to be able to see where it goes in the end and what the legacy is, like Tony was talking about, is an important piece. So trying to, if people want to be on a mailing list to find out where it goes next, making that option available, and having a way to get feedback and evaluation, I think is really important. And actually social media is pretty good for that in some ways. People will reach out to you and let you know if they liked it or if they didn't, or if they want something more.
Thank you both, Beth, Anthony, Tracy, for asking the question. Did we have any other questions of any of our panelists? Mary, I think I see you.
Sorry, I just tried to unmute myself.
I know, all the unmuting. Please go ahead and ask a question.
The slide deck that you had at the beginning of your presentation, Andrea, I was wondering, are you going to provide that to us? Because I took a couple of snapshots, but I didn't want to keep getting distracted with taking pictures of the slides, and was wondering if you were going to be doing that, and also if there was going to, and I don't know if I took it down, but the Spark grant. I know you said the deadline to get it in was in January of 2021, but when is that actually going to be available for the public to start to fill out?
That's a good question. So our aim is to make the Spark information available. Sorry, I have terrible feedback there. Tomorrow. So we plan to send you an email with an overview of the hotspot, the Spark information, as well as the deck, so that everybody who's attended will have all of that.
Okay, and sorry, you said the application was going to be in that?
Yes, it will.
Okay, great. Thanks.
No problem. And I see Carol, I think. Oh, go ahead, Emma.
Oh, you just beat me to it. I was going to say we had a question in the chat, so I'll let you ask it.
So I guess we have a question from Carol that says, are the projects presented by the panelists volunteer run or supported by an organizational structure? I can certainly let the panelists answer the questions. I feel like Two of them are definitely sort of had an organizational structure, and one was a lead artist with an organization working alongside. Would any of the panelists like to jump in on that? Or have I adequately kind of answered? Okay, I'll go with that. That was an adequate answer. Do we have any other questions?
Hi everyone. I was wanted to jump in just a more quick comment. I just want to show love for all the work that's happening in Scarborough. I co-sign everything Tony said, and just coming up in the We Are Lawrence project with him, I just want to reiterate the power of community storytelling and seeing those full circle moments in how it's been able to develop community, but also bring a lot of the arts back into the margins and empower community. So apologies, I've just been in the background watching and cheering really loud, but I want to reiterate some of the programs showing love for everything that's been happening in the growth of cultural hotspots since 2014. I also just speaking a little bit in my capacity as a freelance photojournalist. I love being able to amplify the voice of people in Scarborough and communities. So if there are projects that are coming on, I'm always on board to come in and document stuff behind the scenes. We built a little bit of a project with Scarborough Made. I'll drop the information in on the chat for anybody interested in looking at. And the real focus was just to document for social good and to be able to capture stories of humanity in Scarborough, focusing on, just amplifying the voice once again. So big ups for everything that's going up. Big ups to Tony. And it's just great to kind of see the, the growth of cultural hotspots and the amazing arts programs from everybody who's kind of presented today on the panel that's happened kind of within that time. So just really proud of this moment. I just want to share that love.
It looks like there's some consensus to get started. So we have, when we shared these up, there were a few questions, 3 questions that we wanted to ask. And these are the same questions that are being asked in the other room. And then based upon that, we just want to help get a better understanding of what everybody here today is really thinking and feeling when it comes to your neighborhood and public art and looking at 2021. So for the first question, I'm going to be taking notes as well too. So if I'm not looking directly at you, that's the reason why. But for the first question, what spaces in your neighborhood would you like to see animated by public art and why? If anybody wants to start off, feel free to unmute. What spaces in your neighborhood would you like to see animated by public art and why? Sid, I know you're mighty passionate as you came on the screen. If you feel like chiming in, Tracy, we heard from you as well too. So I'm sure there's some like ideas and already there simmering.
Definitely. I live in Malvern currently, and the thing that really special to me in the sense that we've got a lot of occasions where like that.
Sorry.
I know because of when a lot of communities, people are still finding. Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me?
I think we're having the signal cut out occasionally. So you might wanna, I apologize asking you to not stream your video sincerely, but it might help with the sound.
Or
I do love your face. Okay.
Whatever, Lori. Can you guys hear me better now or no? Thumbs up? Thumbs
Definitely
up?
clear.
Okay, thank you. I just was like animating spaces or in public spaces still, like parks, and things like that, because there are still drumming groups in the parks, and I find kids are out more, and families are more walking and things like that. So maybe not necessarily programming that engages in group activity, but maybe it's something that when you're walking by or when you're in the park, you notice, like even if it's a QR code that leads you to something else. So that's what I'm interested in. Not necessarily, I think, the idea of always going virtual and always having a Zoom talk. Like, I think we're doing that so much at work now. It would be good to have something in the public space where it's not necessarily a gathering, but it's still visual and it still connects you online, but there's other ways to engage. So that's just from this summer, that's what it is and what I would like to see, because I think it really informs where people actually are in the parks and like just walking around in their neighborhoods. Like I see so many people all the time now that I haven't before COVID. But yeah, that's what I'm interested in. Because I think with the malls and stuff, like people are still at Malvern Mall, and it is like you have to do your groceries, you have to get snacks, you have to like go to the bank there. Yeah, but I would really like to see some more like active things in like actual public space outside that doesn't involve somehow, I don't know how this is done, involve like people activities together.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tracy. Is there anybody else that would like to build upon what Tracy has started? Really kind of even looking at parks. And one thing that Tracy, you hit upon there is, because we're talking about public art, but also a thing about the Year of Public Art is that the public art doesn't have to be a mural. The public art doesn't have to be something that is a permanent. It can also be temporary, ephemeral, and it can complement something that's already existing. So I liked what Tracy you said there, even about drumming and having the drum groups in the park, and how can that even be a complement to public art? Was there anybody else who'd like to build upon that?
Yeah, I don't mind going and just kind of building on the aspect of looking at public art and where my interests have kind of lied was being able to take unconventional spaces that people visit and place art in there and to see how people interact with that. And one thing that comes to mind when looking at art practice, somebody who I've followed greatly for a number of years and built a lot of my inspiration for anybody knows, the artist JR has been really well at the Inside Out project of taking up wheat pastings of portraits and placing it up in different spots to tell stories. So I'm really interested in that kind of aspect and finding ways to do storytelling by placing it in places where we now see maybe less people attending or less people going to sing. So seeing how that art can essentially bring people back into a space or start conversations. Similar to JR's work, there's a photojournalist organization called Disturb that places images of different issues on international relations in the world, along with a breakdown of what's going on on walls. Same idea of wheat pasting. So I'm really interested in kind of seeing how that can take part, and then prepositioning in a little bit of the cultural aspect of our community. So something that comes to mind right off the bat is plazas. Plazas are what I feel is a very historical, symbolic aspect of what Scarborough looks like. And I think being able to look at the different communities, looking at how the plazas are situated in Scarborough, for example, and being able to bring art into that spaces may start different conversations, obviously documenting the people and capture their stories in those spaces too. But finding ways that you can interact with that, also looking at the impacts of COVID, knowing that small businesses are having a more of a challenging time as with everybody else. So finding ways that we can use art to also impact economic development at the same time.
I kind of wanted to add on to that because we're finding that so many, like we counted just along Danforth yesterday, there are now 53 empty storefronts where businesses haven't made it through COVID. And that these are these empty storefronts, but I'm really struck with how can we activate those windows to become gallery spaces or display spaces in a kind of meanwhile period over the next year while they try to find new tenants in a terrible economic situation. And I think that there could be a lot there. And I think it's also really wonderful working with the local business improvement areas and the residents associations, because then they feel real pride in place. And instead of having a rundown empty storefront with newspaper in the window, there's something for people that they can look at when they go down the street. The other place that I'm really interested for East End Arts is the East York Civic Center. It had a renovation a few years ago. It's beautiful outdoor square that really gets used one day a week for a farmer's market, and it's a large space, so would really allow for social distancing. And how can we activate that space and in the future?
All right, thanks. This time I'm unmuting. I made the mistake of not unmuting last time. So thank you so much, Shanna, for the input there. That's fabulous. Just in the interest of time, because we do have a couple of other questions. If we do have time, we'll come back just to flesh out this question a little bit more. But I'm going to take us to the next question, which is and there might be some bleeding from the question number 1 to number 2, which is fine. But what type of public art do you want to see or create, and why? Anybody else like to jump in on that? What type of public art do you want to see or create, and why? So we talked about location a little bit more in the first one. Is there any particular kind of public art that you'd like to see created in your neighborhood? In Scarborough, East End, big spaces, big places, or what kind of art would you like to see created?
I'm gonna volunteer to go. I'll let you go before me.
Okay, Jackie.
Okay.
So I received a small micro grant for a community mural, which is been prepared, is now at Birkdale Community Center, which is where my Birkdale Arts Festival event takes place. It's an annual event. And I'd like to build on that community mural, both in an indoor and outdoor capacity, and hopefully we'll be able to get support for that from street art. I don't think that I would necessarily be able to go through the Artworks TO 10-year strategy for funding. And the local artist who did the community mural for me, now it wasn't done, the project wasn't executed in the way that we would have liked, in that it was not, there was not participation from the community, although I got input from the community virtually. But we hopefully in 2021 will be able to have more active participation from the community. However, it's pretty small scale, so I think that Street Art Toronto would be my best funding source, but I'm not sure that the project would even be able to compete at that level, because I've spoken to the manager of that funding stream, and it's a little it's competitive. So, but I would like to continue with the community mural process in the Birkdale Community Center and Ravine. I have an artist who is engaged in that process with me, and but she agreed to do the mural in the community center within my budget from the micro grant, but it was really far below what would be fair artist fees for her. So I don't want to impose on her again.
Okay, thanks so much, Carol. So Carol has identified a community mural or some form of mural within the Birkdale Community Center and Ravine. Is there anybody else who envisions something in terms of public art that either is a mural or something completely different? And why do you feel that would be important? Taking callers. Would photography be something that people would want to see? Something other than murals? Would you be able? Jackie, were you going to say something? Did you want to continue on what Carol has said?
Sure. I actually have to leave in a minute to pick up my daughter, but I work for Mural Roots and we do murals, and we've been trying to think of a way for next year to do something a little bit different though, and sort of to build on what Tracy said. I live in the Kingston Road Morningside area, and during COVID, every week I've been trying to get out and walk in the parks in Morningside Park, on the waterfront trail. And I noticed how well used those spaces are and all the different communities that use them. And so we've been starting to talk about a way to paint on the trail, and create some temporary art with, on the trails that's community engaged, that tells the stories of the people that use the trails. Yeah, that's what I'd like to see. And I have to say thank you to everybody, and I have to run, unfortunately. But thank you for the lovely meeting. It was wonderful. And I love hearing everybody's stories and ideas.
Jackie, would it be okay if I followed up with you on that? Because Birkdale Ravine would be well aligned with what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Please, we'll find a way to I'll leave my contact in the chat.
Perfect.
Okay.
I know Scarborough Arts well, and I know you're in the same building. So it would be great. It'll be very easy for us to connect. I'm good friends with Derek Spooner.
Oh, okay. I'll get your contact through Derek because I have to run now. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Say hello to your daughter for us. All right, thanks. Well, I think maybe even building upon that, about like taking art, mural roots. They're about murals, but thinking about doing something either maybe even different than a mural, or still a mural, but maybe in a different, using a different type of a canvas and going in a different space. And that's great to hear. Was there anybody else, maybe one other question to field on this? Wants to like talk about maybe what type of art, public art they would like to see in their neighborhood?
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, hi.
Hi there, Stephen.
Hi. So I've been kind of like listening to most of this, and it's really interesting that we are strictly really just talking about visual arts. And I'm kind of wondering about ways of presenting theater, literary, music, dance, all those other arts in a time when people really can't congregate together in the same space. And how can we do that in a more public space, in a public art space?
Great question. Does anybody else, I could talk about that, but it doesn't need to be myself, but is there anybody else in the room that wants to have reply to Stephen's question, if you have an answer? All right, somebody else is wondering the same thing. Okay, so maybe I'll just jump on from my understanding. This is coming from the city, and I mentioned it a little bit off the top. So a part of what the Year of Public Arts Artworks TO for next year is really focusing on is how to also animate existing works of public art. Um, can you actually and even beyond that, can you actually create, as you're saying, Stephen, like a temporary public arts? Can that be done with like more of a soundscape or a sound sculpture? How, because in terms of visual arts, like not a, it's going to be accessible, but only accessible to people that have vision. But for people who might be blind or impaired, vision impaired, maybe there's something else that we can present to them. So I just wanted to say that it's a possibility to explore literature, music, and dance and theater within the realm of Artworks TO for 2021. I'm getting a prompt to take us to the last question. So I'm going to do that. My apologies for just jumping through. But for the last question here, how would you engage people in creating a piece of public art while adhering to COVID-19 guidelines? That might be a bit of the extra kicker. How do you engage with people and populations in creating a piece of public art? That can be music, it could be theater, it could be dance, it could be visual, but while still adhering to COVID-19 guidelines. Who wants to step into that one? Any takers? I know maybe we're all a bit tired of hearing about the COVID-19 guidelines. But I'm sure with this group, you must have some ideas, even things that you've already implemented in your current work. How would you be able to translate that into a public art piece? And again, it can be beyond visual arts. We've got one more minute, and then we're going to get the boot back for everybody to join to the larger collective.
Sorry, Nafal, I totally missed that last question. It was just within the COVID restrictions, like how do we plan for that?
Yeah, it's well, how would you engage people in creating a piece of public art while adhering to COVID-19 guidelines? So you have to work within the guidelines. So how would you actually engage with people in public art?
Well, I know we're gonna get the go-to just before, but I definitely think it's been a little bit of constantly adapting and planning for like what the new normal will be, and having a very open, flexible plan. As guidelines change according to like when reopening happens to the possibility that we go back into it. So I think the one thing that I've had to do is always look at a flexible plan and have like plan A, B, and C. Different options, whether it's venue spaces from going outdoors to indoors, and that's just overall with planning. I don't know if that helped the question, but I know from a photography standpoint, I'm used to doing a lot of work very close up, and having to figure out how to move and change my own way of shooting to being a little bit more distance to follow that protocol. So it takes, I think, like everybody, I don't know if I'm speaking over the actual question, but it does take a step back and looking at and also checking in with everybody's ability. So it's not the same as being able to document as we did before from a photojournalistic standpoint. We really have to go in and check with the people and have a better plan in place.
Okay, thanks so much there, Sid. We're still in the room, so they haven't booted us out to be out with the larger group. So just to build on that, but like having the plan A and B and C and contingencies. So part of those contingencies, would you say if you're doing a public art piece for 2021 and knowing that we're still likely going to be impacted and quite greatly by COVID, how much of that is going to be online, virtual, and how much could then be even in person? Like, how do you see that mix between the virtual and in person? Oh, I think we're together. All right, we're all together, everybody.
Woohoo! But we thought, I mean, we could certainly, in our group, we didn't get to really delve deeply into the third question. So we're happy to kind of have that discussion as the bigger group. And we actually just didn't even get to it. So we'd love to listen in and hear what you all have been talking about and jump in and talk about it together.
Well, Sid just provided some insight just from his background as a photographer, and being open, flexible, and adapting and planning, and having a plan A, B, and C, and contingencies. And then the question I posed to the group, and now the bigger group, is how would you see that mix between in-person, what can be virtual? Is it going to be a hybrid? Have you found even now that that's working? Is it successful? Are people just a bit burnt out by having things virtually? So how would you see creating a public art piece living under a COVID world? Now the big group can jump in.
Well, not knowing what was fully discussed here, if I can put, if you don't mind, Tyler, if I put you on the spot, I feel like what you were talking about that you had been doing with Guild Festival Theatre was a really great approach to dealing with COVID. If you don't mind sharing some of that with the larger group.
Not at all. Yeah. Our approach was sort of like twofold. One, sorry, just for everyone's context, I'm Tyler Sagan, one of the co-artistic directors of the Guild Festival Theatre. We're a theatre company that presents large-scale outdoor work in Guild Park and Gardens at the Greek Theatre. We've been putting on main stage productions there for about 10 years. And this year, because of COVID, we had to postpone our planned season. We're going to be doing Alice in Wonderland and Saltwater Moon. Instead of doing that, we created cabaret pieces that were inspired by those plays, and took them to the streets of Guildwood so that people could experience them from their own homes. We called them porch plays. The idea was that the audience could stay on their porch, and we would come to them. And this mitigated needing to bring people together at the venue itself. We didn't publicize these widely. We essentially connected with a host who had us at their place, and dropped off some flyers in the mailbox of the immediate neighbors. And so we tried to keep it. The point was keeping it small scale, to avoid gatherings and to avoid any sort of like COVID issues. We did at the end of the summer manage to get 2 days in the venue. So we had 4 performances, and in each performance we hosted 50 audience members. That was a lot more challenging, and took a lot of planning, a lot of contact tracing, and like collecting contact tracing information, booking tickets online, hand sanitizing stations. Like there was a lot that went into that. And if anyone would like to know more about the ways that we approached the work in light of COVID-19, we wrote up a pretty thorough document documenting what we did. To share that with anyone if they want to get in touch with me about looking for specifics.
Thank you. That's amazing, Tyler. I think that could be really beneficial to folks. And I loved, I'm just putting people on the spot because that's just how I roll. I apologize. But also, Beth, because something that you were speaking about is something that I say to my husband every day while I walk down the street. And I say, there's an empty storefront. Don't you think it would be great if? And he just says, like, what are you talking about? But if you wouldn't mind just touching on kind of your desire maybe to animate storefronts, I think that would be lovely.
No, I was saying also that it sounds like East End Arts is doing a lot of that too, but kind of that combo of the storefronts, and then also in Scarborough we have so many strip malls with a lot of parking lot space, and it is kind of a gathering space, but it's not necessarily held or like crafted in that sense. So I know there was the Plaza Pops group. It was like an urban design group that was looking at different models of how to make that a more welcoming public space. Like kind of like food trucks and like more of a festival kind of vibe with performances in those parking lots would be a really amazing thing. And yeah, I live in East York, Shana, and I've seen so many of those installations and things in the shop. There's so many vacant shop windows, and to see them animated with art is always such a pleasurable thing.
And just to jump in here, with this discussion about how to plan for COVID, and gathering and the size of the gatherings, one of the things that I think both Tyler and Beth's projects touch on is that, it is planned, but as far as the public know, like they don't know that it's not planned, like they stumble upon it. For Hotspot, we've been doing that ourselves, having some pop-up events that are, of course, unadvertised and unannounced to avoid crowds. And so that is absolutely, I think, just such a great option for planning for the pandemic and making sure that we don't have crowds gathering, especially if it has to be a contingency plan to maybe, an event that you'd like to have, and then finding a way to scale that.
In some ways, I wonder, understanding that it's all very difficult to deal with, there's kind of this interesting liberation about not having this pressure to have huge audience numbers and to just kind of get to have these smaller, intimate art experiences. The idea of, being a host to a play on my porch, I don't have a porch, but is amazing. Something I've seen during COVID in my neighborhood, downtown on the Esplanade. There's been a group that's been doing itinerant performances, and so somebody is being driven along, like a musician is singing and playing a piano, kind of in the back of a cart with a cyclist. I'm not explaining that well, but seeing things like that happen and just kind of driving by you in a park and you're taking in performance in this way, it's really kind of beautiful to see these really creative ways of responding to a really difficult time. So, we're really hoping that next year, like I say, that it is this really interesting opportunity just to respond. And even if we know that we're making project proposals that do have contingency plans and are, potentially not as we originally envisioned them, I think there can be some great connectivity and creativity.